Once again, we realign the component and tack the first corner, double-check the alignment, and then tack the opposite corner. Now we're ready for the soldering process. It's usually a good idea to add a compatible type of external flux, even though there may already be some flux in the solder wire. Additional liquid flux will improve the solderability. The tip should rest flush against the top of the lead. Now contact the lead and the land with the solder wire away from the tip. This will allow the flux to clean the connection instead of burning away on the tip of the iron. You don't want to press on gull wing leads or lands. Even light pressure can bend or skew the lead out of position or damage the land. You'll need to use a light touch when soldering. You can proceed from one joint to the next rather than skipping leads to avoid heat buildup in the board. There is much less heat being applied to a surface mount board, since there is no need to heat the solder on both sides of a plated through hole. Just keep working your way around until all of the joints are soldered. Drag or wave soldering makes the installation process much faster and more efficient. A single-sided chisel tip or angled wave-style tip can be used to melt solder into a whole row of connections in one continuous motion. Let's take a detailed look at the drag soldering technique using a QFP. We'll start by aligning the part to ensure that all the leads are centered on the lands and make sure the polarity is correct. Then, we tack two diagonally opposite corner leads. After the leads have been tacked, it's important to inspect the alignment in case it shifted during the tack operation. Then, select a corner that was not tacked and apply liquid or paste flux to that row of leads. Flux is critical for the drag soldering operation because it reduces the surface tension of the solder, which reduces the chance of solder shorts. Now we're ready to prepare the tip. First, make sure that the tip is properly cleaned. Next, we'll need to add some fresh solder to the tip. Then position the tip against the first solder joint on one of the corners that is not tacked. When you have two corners tacked, it's critical that you don't start the soldering operation on one of the tacked connections because the position of the component may shift. As the tip moves from one joint to the next, the required amount of solder will transfer from the tip to the leads if you move at the right speed. You should be able to watch each connection form as you proceed. When you come to the end of the row, just keep moving the tip past the final lead in a continuous motion. It is important that you apply very little or no downward pressure onto the component leads, as too much pressure can cause the leads to bend and misalign with the lands. If you stop the movement of the tip at the end of the row, you may end up with too much solder on the final lead, or more likely, a solder bridge will occur. If you do create a solder bridge anywhere along the row of leads, you can just stop and reflux the bridge. Then, clean off any solder from the tip onto a damp sponge. Now reposition the tip on the bridge and remove the excess solder by pulling the soldering iron away from the component.